12:14 is the time, and young people are particularly vulnerable to eating disorders. As many as 5% of young people have one, and many often end up in the hospital because of it. Now, a researcher with UCSF is trying to break the cycle and help young patients recover from eating disorders. We want to welcome UCSF clinical psychology postdoctoral fellow Megan McHale. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me on.
What did your study find?
So we found something pretty remarkable, which was that even a relatively small amount of outpatient therapy, about 8 sessions over a period of 3 months, could keep kids out of the hospital and break these cycles of repeated hospitalizations that we often see for young people who can't access appropriate care.
So what does that tell us about the nature of eating disorders? What's at the root of the disease?
That's a really good question. So there's a lot that contributes to it. We know that it's a biopsychosocial model, but often in recovery, it's therapy that's really important. And especially for young people, having their parents and caregivers involved and making sure that the whole family system is supporting them and getting enough to eat is really critical for them in recovering. Also, being able to stay in their community and be engaged in school and with supportive relationships can be really important, which is why outpatient therapy plays such a critical role.
What kind of therapy works best, or does it matter?
That's a great question. So in this particular study, we saw that it was really any type of therapy. It didn't necessarily have to be a specialized care or delivered by specialists. But in general, we do see that family-based therapy, so therapy that integrates parents and caregivers, is most effective. And that's because an eating disorder can be really hard to overcome on your own. So having support from family can be really critical in getting young people better.
Your study looked at young people on Medi-Cal and how effective the therapy was for that particular group. Why was that an important population to study?
So I think people sometimes think about young people with Medi-Cal as a niche population, but they're really not. So about 3 in 7 young people in the state of California have Medi-Cal insurance. And so understanding services for this population is particularly critical. They can also have difficulties accessing care. So a lot of providers will take private insurance, but they won't necessarily take public insurance. And that can set these young people up for more negative outcomes. So figuring out what actually helps them stay out of the hospital and helps them recover is particularly important.
So you said that any type of therapy helped and was better than none. What other treatments are there for eating disorders, and hasn't therapy always been some part of the treatment?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And actually, historically, young people have tended to go to more residential facilities or these more involved kind of what we call higher levels of care. It's actually just in the past few decades that we've realized that outpatient therapy is really effective. Eating disorders are really serious, but therapy isn't always part of the treatment. In fact, we saw that for these young people, almost half of them got no therapy at all after they were in the hospital. So I think it's something that still needs to get out there as to how helpful and effective therapy can be for these disorders.
So some got no therapy at all in the past, so they just went to, what was their treatment, just going to like a facility?
Yeah, going to the hospital. So what we often see is that if young people don't get treatment, don't get therapy, they can become really medically unwell because of the effects of eating disorders on the entire body. So they ended up in the hospital because their heart rate was low or they were really kind of struggling physically. And what we can see is that if kids don't get therapy after that, they can just go in and out of the hospital. So it could be months or even years where they're not stable and not able to kind of fully participate in their life.
What is it about the therapy that is so effective for this particular disorder?
I think it's really the entire family coming together to support the young person and making sure that the young person kind of gets what they need. I think there's still that we need to kind of understand about this therapy, but I think even having a little bit of support can really help a lot. The sort of primary things that we do in therapy are helping kids get on a regular schedule of eating and helping parents feel empowered to support their young person. And even those really little interventions can make a big difference, even though eating disorders are quite serious.
And really quickly before you go, are eating disorders on the rise among young people, and how much is the addition of GLP-1 medications and people seeing others lose weight at a pretty fast rate, how is that affecting the disorder?
You know, that's a great question. And I think research on that is still ongoing. But what we are seeing is that the eating disorders are being recognized in more people. So historically, it's been thought to be something that affects just wealthy white girls. But what we know now is that eating disorders can affect anyone. So there's a lot more recognition, a lot more diagnosis, although we still have a ways to go in recognizing everyone who needs care.
All right, Megan McHale, clinical psychology postdoctoral fellow at UCSF and the author of this study. Thank you for speaking with us and your insight.
Thank you so much.